Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. This is a day ending in Y, so I'm doing a live stream concerning the geopolitical chaos that is erupting around the world. We are going to talk predominantly about Iran today, a little bit about Russia as it tangentially is connected to Iran and what's going on there. I just want to purge myself of some stuff concerning Donald Trump's speeches that he's been giving that show, I think, a massive lack of coherence. And I want to go dip into UK politics and look at backtracking from a couple of the opposition parties as they start reading the polls and really taking a barometer reading of the UK national opinion and realize that actually they're on the wrong side of history. They're on the wrong side of the public of wrong side of public opinion. So that's quite interesting. There's no kind of contrition in the United States concerning the governmental positioning on Iran. I think there's an awful lot of doubling down, but I think deep down, probably Donald Trump is realizing that this might not have been as clever an idea as he was hoping, because I think he sees things in terms of the economy, predominantly in the price of petrol or gas at the pump. That is a real driver of political discontent if that starts ticking up, and it is. And he's panicking, and that's why he's lifting sanctions on Russia, which then benefits Russia, which gets Europeans annoyed. I mean, this war in Iran at the moment is having a huge impact and will have a huge impact on every economy and around the world. I think every country has a right to be really bloody angry with Donald Trump at the moment and the American attack on Iran, particularly because it's not well thought through. If it's really well thought through and it had all of these goals set in place that were very clearly identifiable, then you can say, okay, you're doing it for this reason, that's a good reason. Okay, we understand this. It's legally justified, it's constitutionally justified, all this kind of stuff. Then, okay, we can go along with that. And hopefully that gives us time to be prepared for the shock of the shutting the Strait of Hormuz. But instead, there was no pre-warning. There was no discussion with Five Eyes colleagues or allies about this. It was driven by Netanyahu and Israel. They convinced Trump to go along with it. People around Trump, like Stephen Miller, no doubt involved in that persuasion. And they've jumped in with both feet. And it's not been a very good decision. Militarily, it's been pretty damn successful in terms of blowing stuff up. But again, blowing up a girls' school, hitting a girls' school and seeing the death of huge numbers of civilians there, maybe 170 in total, many schoolgirls killed. That is not a good look. And we're going to have a little dip into that as well, because Trump has been coming up with some absolute nonsense regarding that. Anyway, it's all so ill thought out that it's dragged the rest of the world down into this vortex, this maelstrom of political and economic chaos, and people aren't happy. And the Middle Eastern nations, the Gulf nations, I don't think are particularly happy at the moment. And it's looking like Iranians are no longer particularly happy, who have otherwise been supportive of the US, because they see it as a pathway to regime change. It's not looking like that is at all a concern of the Trump administration. So it is pretty controversial stuff. Look, I'm on my own today, so I am less able to be able to survey your comments and react to them, but nonetheless, keep having a lively chat in the live thread. If you're not watching this live, where have you been? You should be here live. Of course you should. But please remember to like, subscribe, and share if you have not already done so. I've said this so often, I say it every day, every video. If you haven't subscribed, I mean, honestly. Right, let's go and look at what's been going on. We're going to go first to an opinion of a Senator, Chris Coons, here from the Democrats. He is going to give us his sense of what for. No, I'm not, because I'm not even sharing that. So let's start by sharing the right tab here.
President Trump gives answers out of both sides of his mouth in the same day, partly to influence oil prices, partly to keep our allies guessing, and I think largely to try and keep our enemies on their back foot. I also think right now the clearest winner from this war in Iran is Russia. It's stunning that President Trump is on the phone with Vladimir Putin and spending more time consulting with him than he is with Congress and the American people.
Absolutely on point there. Trump is literally spending more time consulting with Putin than he is with his own with Congress. So that's what's going on from Chris Coons' point of view. This is to the benefit of Russia first and foremost. Let's pop in to see what the rest of his politics pair have to say about it. It's a little clip from their analysis. Alistair Campbell at the top, Rory Stewart at the bottom.
Now over $100 a barrel for oil. You've got Saudi, Kuwait, Bahrain, Emirates, Iraq, Qatar, Oman and Iran. Between them, about 30% of the world's oil. One of the big Japanese banks has done a report today saying this is the biggest energy supply and logistics crisis that we have seen in modern history. Bear in mind, this is Trump who said he would not start any new wars and he would get prices down. He started a new war, and oil prices are now averaging $3.45 a gallon and still rising.
Huge impact, unfortunately.
And I just want to pause there because, I mean, yesterday we had a commenter, Chris C, who was like, you know, cry harder. I normally support you in what you say, but I can't be doing with this criticism of Trump and therefore criticism of America. Therefore, that, you know, Trump is doing something that is correct, that's right, even though it's not legally justified, not congressionally mandated. The problem for anyone supporting what Trump is doing is they have to accept that Trump lied to them. Right? There's no, you can't have both ways here. Like Trump said, I'm not going to take you into another war, another Middle Eastern war. And he's, you know, he essentially went to war very quickly, I guess, in Venezuela, and now has gone to war on the behest of Netanyahu in the Middle East. So he's at least lied to you if you voted for him. Certainly if you voted for him on the principle of being a peacemaker and not going to war.
Fortunately on Europe and the UK and economies like Germany. And you don't think about what's that going to mean for people trying to grow soybeans in Brazil? What's that going to mean for Bangladesh? What's that going to mean for sub-Saharan Africa? Because in 3 months' time, fertilizer prices will spike and some of the poorest countries of the world will be affected.
Now over $100 a barrel for oil.
So this will have knock-on effects to all sorts of all sorts of people. Oh, look, I've got live chats coming up the side of my face there. I don't know how I take that off. No, I won't do that. There we go. Get rid of them. So yeah, there are going to be so many knock-on effects to all these countries around the world. This is just a very bad idea from an international political point of view, but also from a domestic point of view. As mentioned, you know, people are driven in their political positioning and political mood by the cost of groceries, but the cost of petrol, the cost of gas. Slow hand clap for the Muppets who voted for Trump because of cheaper gas. Well done. You shoved us all. So this is, by the looks of it, a independent newspaper. Oh no, it could be that looks like there's a Guardian actually. California gas prices rise above $5 a gallon amid US war with Iran. So it's not looking good there. Now we're going to go to Simon Marks. I do like a bit of Simon Marks. He is the US correspondent for LBC, and he doesn't hold back. We're going to be listening to a bit of Donald Trump in Mar-a-Lago and elsewhere from last night and before. Simon Marks gives us a bit of a roundup as to what we can expect to hear.
It is exasperating, isn't it, James? I mean, the performance by the president yesterday in his press conference down at Mar-a-Lago was a masterclass in evasion, in contradiction, and in making it up on the fly. I mean, he got to the point yesterday at Mar-a-Lago where he actually, seriously, with a straight face, was advancing the argument that not only was Iran on the brink of getting a nuclear weapon that could eventually target the United States, although he simultaneously laid claim to the argument that he had completely obliterated all of Iran's nuclear capacity only last July in Operation Midnight Hammer. But he also advanced the claim that Iran was on the brink of taking over the entire Middle East. That, he said, is why he had to act. I mean, luckily they got in just in the nick of time and stopped Iran from taking over the entire Middle East.
Honestly, just incredible. The lies, the extent to which Trump lies, that it knows no bound, right? So Trump is routinely bending the truth to his advantage concerning the war in Iran and everything else in government, right? He's lied about the idea, I think you can call it a lie, about the idea of the Tomahawk coming from the Iranians. And he's lying here about the Iranians being on the precipice of taking over the entire Middle East. I mean, absolute garbage.
Completely false, specious claim. There isn't a single analyst out there that can find anything rooted in fact to support that claim. So he says we've won, but we haven't won enough. When he's pushed on what winning enough looks like, it becomes apparent that he's going to do this for a few more days and then perhaps engage in some kind of partial withdrawal, although what sort of ability he has to constrain Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Israeli forces from continuing their assault on Iran was not addressed during the course of the press conference. And I think it's become evident that behind the scenes, he's had the Qataris and the Saudis particularly putting the arm on him and saying, this has got to stop. We told you not to do this. We've warned you consistently about the risks of this sparking a wider regional conflict in the Middle East. It's laying waste to our economies. It's laying waste to cities like Dubai. It's putting our citizens at risk. You've got now to climb down. And buried in all of this, James, was the complete betrayal of the American people by a president who twice now, during the protests back in January, and then again 8 or 9 days ago when this war got underway, said to the Iranian people, first time round, help is on the way. Second time round, now is the time for action. Now is the time for you to seize control of your own destiny. But take a listen to the betrayal of the Iranian people by Donald Trump at the end of the press conference yesterday.
And this is a really important part of the press conference to listen to. It starts off sounding absolutely outrageous, but I think he misunderstands the question slightly, and the subject is actually not the Iranian people, but the Iranian regime when he says that they are menacing. Otherwise, it's an insanely bad take on the situation, which is even beyond, I think, what Trump would say. But if you're to take it at face value, what he says now is nuts. But I think it shows you that he has no desire really to put the people of Iran at the forefront of his thoughts on and his goals for this war in Iran.
Most the Iranian people, you would help them, but it sounds like you're willing to end this fight after your military objectives have wrapped up. Isn't that a betrayal of the people?
Will I help them? I'd like to, if they can behave, but they've been very menacing. You know, they're great people. They have an amazing population. It's amazing, smart, brilliant, energetic. They have a great, I'd love to help them, but they have to be in a system that allows them to be helped. And
which is utterly insane, right? So he had said in the January protests, huge protests, that he had said that we've got your back. You know, if you go and protest, we'll help you. Now he's saying we can't help you because your system is broken. Well, yeah, they want you to come and, or your system is constraining on you. It's not the right system. Yeah, that's what they want you to change, right? That's the regime change part of it. But now he doesn't seem to want to do regime change. And so essentially you could read this as hanging the Iranian people out to dry after having promised them he's got their back to the point that they came out to protest and perhaps maybe 25,000 of them or more were killed. And now he's like, not too bothered.
Been very menacing. You know, they're great people. They have an amazing population. It's amazing, smart, brilliant, energetic. They have a great, I'd love to help them, but they have to be in a system that allows them to be helped. And right now they're in a system that only allows failure. And I don't want that. And I want.
So I can only help you if you have some democratic revolution where you completely replace the system so that you have a completely different system. Then I can help you. But by that time, you won't need help because you've made that system that you want us to help you to bring about. Just none of it makes sense. The man is he's a wrong un.
We want a system that's not going to be attacking us. We want a system that can lead to many years of peace. And if we can't have that, we might as well get it over with right now. Yeah, please.
I think
so. Okay. Like Trump made very little sense there. And I think generally is incoherence on Iran. There have been all of these different reasons as to why the US is at war with Iran. Proffered by the administration officials. So Marco Rubio said something different to Pete Hegseth, saying something different to Donald Trump, and so on and so forth. And JD Vance has just disappeared, right? But we're not really hearing all that much on nuclear anymore. We are not hearing all that much on humanitarian, democratic ideas in terms of regime change. What you're hearing more and more is a very narrow military understanding. That's what Pete Hegseth is now pushing hard on. And that's probably because realistically, that's all they recognize they can achieve and get out in a timely fashion. Anything involving regime change and maybe even looking to completely eradicate nuclear capabilities would require boots on the ground and involvement in Iran that would be far too controversial and difficult for the American, for the Trump regime to claim a win. So I really think you're going to see if not a pivot, then a subtle kind of not going to talk about all these other ideas. We're just going to go hard on the military thing, claim that we've blown up the Iranian army and navy and air force, and then get out and say, yeah, job done. We always said it was going to be a military operation. All those other things, it's not what we are concerning ourselves with. It. Apart from that was the kind of hope you were giving the protesters previously. So, yeah, and part of the issue for the Trump administration is this massive lack of forethought, like not realizing that Iran is an ideological. It's a theocracy, right? So what is driving them isn't the petrodollar, right? That's what drives the United States. So when they go and get involved in a war such as Iran, they're looking at how they can gain what's in the national interest of the United States, which is essentially money. There is maybe there used to be ideology concerning capitalism versus communism, that kind of thing, but I don't think that really features so much anymore. There were, say in South America, attempts to overthrow kind of socialist governments over the course of the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And that was something that the US concerned itself with quite a bit. Now the ideology is about empires, it's about China, it's about Russia to a much lesser extent. It's about the threat of Europe, as Trump would see it. And it's about an American hegemony, or at least if it's not going to be a global hegemon, the United States, is going to be a regional hegemon. So you can carve up Europe. We're going to concern ourselves with the Monroe Doctrine, North and South America, and Greenland as well. The thing with going into Iran is that Iran is, as I mentioned, a theocracy. And so if you get rid of their government, or their head of state, they can replace it with someone else. And they've replaced Ayatollah Khamenei with his son. Actually, somewhat estranged. They didn't get on I do believe. And Khamenei said, I don't want him as my replacement while I'm alive. Anyway, he is a replacement, but he's more hardline. So the failure of, decapitating the snake and expecting there to be some kind of more benign ruler that takes Khamenei's place is clear for us to see. So his son, is it Mujtaba Khamenei, he was very heavily involved during the Iran-Iraq war. He was on the really hardcore ideological side of things, involved with the IRGC in a really big way. I mean, the guy is arguably more hardline than Ayatollah Khamenei. And so that's not a sign of success from a political point of view, but it also shows you that Iran just won't roll over and capitulate. They are driven by ideology and not by the economy. And in fact, I think you've heard, is it the foreign minister saying that our economy is screwed anyway, so that's not really going to bother us. So we're just going to, essentially, Iran can now have leverage over everyone by destroying the world economy. They are hitting oil infrastructure in and around the region willy-nilly, right? Or at least, they are hitting it, and it is affecting global trade. They've shut down I think prices have shut down the Strait of Hormuz. Like I've said to you before, I don't think Iran are stopping vessels crossing the Strait of Hormuz, at the point of a gun or whatever, but it's insurers are not willing to insure vessels to cross, which is why Trump's come out and says, look, you captains should have some guts. You need to go and cross the strait. Okay, it's easy for you to say, mates, playing golf in Mar-a-Lago, but we're the ones that have to take all of this flammable liquid across this area where they're firing missiles and drones. So, wind your neck in. Anyway, it is, I think, economically or financially unviable for these ships to cross that channel. So the Americans thinking about accompanying vessels, the French have even touted this as an idea too. So anyway, the Iranians are using their leverage there quite effectively to really harm the global economy because, hey, they've got nothing to lose. So they might as well smack everyone around in the local area because that hurts what hurts the United States most is, is this war being incredibly unpopular back at home. Like, honestly, okay, so from an Iranian point of view, that of course they'd love to shoot down planes and blow up US naval vessels and whatnot, but actually that's too difficult. They don't have, I think, the weapons one way or another to do that effectively. But what they can definitely do is hurt the Americans economically. And with the Israelis, that is an ideological war for them as well, for Netanyahu. So they're not so bothered about international trade really at the moment. They're just worried about absolutely hammering the Iranians. And this leaves Trump in a really difficult situation because it's becoming clearer and clearer that he's in this for economic reasons, really, and hegemonic reasons, but actually that's backfired and he's getting almost the exact opposite. It's unlikely that he's going to have access to Iranian oil in the same way that he did in Venezuela. So what he was hoping, I think, I'm speculating, is that what happened in Venezuela could be replicated in Iran, whereby they got rid of Maduro, kidnapped him, brought in Delcy Rodriguez, and actually she's under their thumb to some degree, but it's pretty much similar regime. So it wasn't a regime change in Venezuela. It was control the oil. Now they have control of the oil with Delcy Rodriguez sort of capitulating there. The US are thinking, right, so we've had this very effective, short military incursion into Venezuela. We've now got control of their oil. Let's go and do that with Iran. Oh, it turns out Iran is massively driven by ideology, and it's a huge country of 92 million people. And at the moment, we promised the protesters X, but we are unable to deliver that to them. And they have died, arguably, protesting in the hope that we will be able to deliver regime change for them, but we can't. And so let's just do the military stuff and then pull out. So I think that's where we're going to see Trump go next, just pulling out and claiming he's got a massive victory under his belt. Here is Trump just saying something that I think is absolutely outrageous.
The Navy is gone. It's all lying at the bottom of the ocean. 46 ships. Can you believe it? In fact, I got a little upset with our people. I said, what quality of ship? Excellent, sir. Top of the line. I said, why did we just capture the ship? We could have used it. Why did we sink them? He said, it's more fun to sink them. I said, they like sinking them better. They say it's safer to sink them. I guess it's probably true. But
they're all having a laugh here. He's having a laugh about sinking ships and killing sailors and saying, well, it's more fun to sink them than to capture them. I mean, I would have said capture them, but they told me sink them. It's more fun. So there we go. We've killed all those people. And everyone else was like, oh, war. Oh, it's hilarious. Oh, we just killed loads of people. Just, wow. As Deborah Meaden says, how can you applaud this? It's more fun to sink Iranian ships than to capture those on board. Just wow. Okay, a little bit here. So, major breaking news, says CNN. Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait, and Iraq cut oil by 6.7 million barrels per day. This is 33% of their total oil production, 6% of global production. Meanwhile, Iran says they are ready for a long war. Trump did that, not Biden, not Harris. That was 100% Trump. He needs to own this. Like, whatever happens here, he needs to own it. And whatever economic backlash there is going to be or ramification to this, that is on Trump. He can't blame anyone else for this. That is on him. Now, the EU Council president here says that Russia has so far been the only beneficiary.
So far, there is only one winner in this war, Russia. It steadily undermines Ukraine's position by flouting international law. It gains new resources to finance its war against Ukraine as energy prices rise. It profits from the diversion of military capabilities that could otherwise have been sent to support Ukraine. And it benefits from the reduced attention to the Ukrainian front as the conflict in the Middle East takes center stage.
He's absolutely right. So sorry about the audio there, but it completely benefits Russia, and it's a very bitter pill, I think, for the Ukrainians to swallow. All of those weapons being used up that they would dearly love to have access to. Now it's got to a point where the French here, this is the former French Prime Minister Dominique de Villepin, he calls for sanctions against Israel and the US over their attacks on Iran. Quote, we say clearly to the United States that their war against Iran is illegal, illegitimate, and dangerous. He says to say no is to say no. First, we will never accept to participate in this war. We condemn it in all international bodies, and we will bear the consequences. We sanction Israel for being in the process of triggering a tragic humanitarian situation in the Middle East. We can take measures. You know, we always say we are dependent. Yes, we are dependent on the means of payment. We are dependent on the digital war, but the Americans are dependent on us too. Let's not underestimate our capabilities, and so on and so forth. So he's talking big there as the former French president. We're going to come back to this sense of, comparing EU responses to, say, British responses, given that we don't have the protection of the EU. I think that's an important dynamic. Right. Now we're going to talk about the whole Tomahawk situation, right, where he has he's claimed that a Tomahawk was responsible or accepted it's responsible for hitting this school, but then claimed it was an Iranian Tomahawk.
There's footage that shows an American missile strike and a Tomahawk missile likely destroyed that Iranian girls' school. So will the U.S. accept any responsibility?
Well, I
for that
haven't seen
strike?
it. And I will say that the Tomahawk, which is one of the most powerful weapons around, is used by, is sold and used by other countries, you know that. And whether it's Iran, who also has some Tomahawks, I wish they had more, but whether
So that's a lie. Iran don't have Tomahawks.
it's Iran or somebody else, the fact that a Tomahawk is very generic. It's sold to other countries, but that's being investigated right now.
So who operates the Tomahawk? We have the Australian Navy operate it, the Dutch Navy, the British Navy. None of those are out there doing anything to do with Tomahawk. So this is essentially him trying to muddy the waters, obfuscate, and get the Americans off the hook there, his own forces off the hook for destroying a girls' school. But this is how it should be done. So this is a great bit of questioning that we don't see. This is the sort of thing you see in Britain, right? Our prime ministers are always under the cosh when it comes to questioning. Our politicians are always given difficult questions. It's part of our political and broadcasting culture. In the United States, more so recently, Trump has purged the White House of anyone that asks critical questions of him or just looks at people and then says, "You're fake news." I'm actually really surprised he didn't do that here. And he sounds quite downbeat, Trump, to this, but this is a fairly, I mean, we're kind of singing his praises, but this should be normal. This is a line of questioning and an approach to questioning for Trump that we just haven't seen in this whole, I think, tenure second time round.
You just suggested that Iran somehow got its hands on a Tomahawk and bombed its own elementary school on the first day of the war. But you're the only person in your government saying this. Even your defense secretary wouldn't say that when he was asked, standing over your shoulder on your plane on Saturday. Why are you the only person saying this?
Because I just don't know enough.
Wow. Why are you the only person saying this? Like, even your own defense secretary hasn't said that. No one else has said this. No one else has lied about Iran having Tomahawks and it could be an Iranian Tomahawk. How come you're the only one that says this? I love that line of questioning. And Trump actually tries to answer it.
Why are you the only person saying this?
Because I just don't know enough about it. I think it's something that I was told is under investigation, but Tomahawks are used by others, as you know. Numerous other nations have Tomahawks. They buy them from us. But I will certainly, whatever the report shows, I'm willing to live with that report.
Which is at least something, right? Whatever the report shows, I'm willing to live with that. Aussie Buggers are back. I was wondering about you. I almost asked about you the other day. Where have you been these days? Good to have you back on board, Aussie. Right, we continue. Enough idle chit chat, Pierce. Right, then we go to Victoria Derbyshire, who's doing a pretty good job these days on Newsnight. Here she talks about Trump's lack of coherence with regard to the rationale for the war.
Today, the price of oil surged. The Chancellor warned inflation may rise. And in Iran, the Ayatollah's hardline son has taken over from his assassinated hardline father. And the US leader told CBS tonight the war is pretty much over, and then later said the US hasn't won enough yet. What's going on? We're live in Florida, where the US leader just finished addressing some of his congressmen and women. We will talk to one of them live in a moment. But first, this is what Donald Trump had to say to them.
We've already won in many ways, but we haven't won enough. We go forward more.
We're going to be looking at this in a second. The idea that there is incoherence at the heart of what Donald Trump says very often. And I don't know whether that's a feature rather than a bug. So the idea is that perhaps he is someone who speaks out both sides of his mouth on purpose, so he can never be wrong, and you can never pin him down, and he's completely vague and oftentimes just incoherent, that you're trying to work out what is it that he's saying here. So you don't like hold him to account, because like, what he said that, but then he said the opposite, and he said everything, and it's that just fire hose of confusion. And that's kind of what Newsnight is pointing out here.
We've already won in many ways, but we haven't won enough. We go forward more determined than ever to achieve ultimate victory that will end this long-running danger once and for all.
And then literally just a few moments or so ago, speaking to reporters, the president said this.
On Iran, you called it an excursion. You said it would be over soon. Are you thinking this week it will be over?
No,
Are you
but
talking
soon.
about days?
I think soon.
Okay, and with respect
Very
to
soon.
Okay, well, that's clear.
So very soon, but it's been going on a week, and you said, you know, he did actually say 4 to 5 weeks. Now he's saying very soon. He's then said it's over. It's pretty much over. We've got it. We've won, but we haven't won enough. Like, which one of, like, what's going on there, mate? Possibly one of the most disturbing elements of the war in Iran is that it appears to be based on information and persuasion coming from a number of people close to him, but two of whom are not even formerly members of the administration. Just so everyone understands how insane this is, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are real estate developers who have a personal axe to grind against Iran because of their ties to Israel. Of course, they're both Jewish. And Pete Hegseth is a religious radical. He's a Christian nationalist who believes bombing Iran will help bring Jesus back. This is Donald Trump at the same speaking engagement.
The situation was very quickly approaching the point of no return, and the United States found it intolerable, in my opinion, based on what Steve and Jared and Pete and others were telling me, Marco, so involved, that I thought that they were going to attack us. I thought they would, if we didn't do this at the time we did it, I think they had in mind to attack us. And the situation was very.
So he's a big fan of these guys, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner.
The situation was very quickly approaching the point of no return, and the United States found it intolerable, in my opinion, based on what Steve and Jared and Pete and others were telling me.
So based on what Steve and Jared, those are the first two names he went to, based on their information, essentially we've gone to war. Really? Holy crap, says Brian Behar. 2 of the 4 people who convinced him that we had to bomb Iran immediately don't even work in our government. They're real estate agents, real estate magnates. They're grifters. Wow. Just incredible. And so we go on. As John Sopel says, the former BBC correspondent, a week ago, it was about regime change and the Iranian people taking back their country. This weekend, there had to be total surrender. Now the war is just a short-term excursion. So he said in Truth Social post that they had to have total surrender. So you had regime change, people taking back their country, total surrender of the regime. Oh, now it's a limited short-term excursion. The war is nearly done.
So the Strait of Hormuz is going to remain safe. We have a lot of Navy ships there. We have the best equipment in the world, inspecting for mines. Again, most of their ships are down at the bottom of the sea, but we will hit them so hard that it will not be possible for them or anybody else helping them to ever recover that section of the world. They do anything. So
he's talking in a really robust manner about the degree to which Iran is on the precipice of being utterly destroyed by the United States. Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart again here talking about the language based on a New York Times analysis, talk about the language Trump and Hegseth have been using with regard to the war in Iran.
And I'll tell you something else which I found fascinating. There's a piece in the New York Times this morning analysing the language that Trump and Hegseth have been using and comparing it with the language that Putin used 4 years ago in relation to Ukraine. Hegseth, we didn't start this war, but under President Trump, we're finishing it. Putin, we didn't start this so-called war, we're trying to finish it. Speaker Johnson, I think you'd call this an operation. The Russian speaker, this is a special military operation. Putin, July 2022, we haven't started anything in earnest yet. Trump, last Monday, we haven't even started hitting them hard. Both said we have no choice but to attack. Both said to the Ukrainians in Putin's case and to the Iranians in Trump's case, lay down your arms and go home or face certain death. So you even get the feeling that they're sort of, that he's kind of cribbing from Putin's playbook in how he communicates this. And as for Hegseth, I saw some of your tweets about Hegseth. It strikes me that you were a little bit shocked by his conduct.
Well, I don't know whether people, I mean, I don't know how many people enough on social media to follow this, but Hegseth's speeches in the White House channel has been putting out these horrendous videos, which are cutting scenes from Hollywood action movies. So weirdly, one of them turns out to be Braveheart. So Scott's fighting against English, but also
with the saltar on his face.
Tropic Thunder, which is a comedy about Vietnam. Yeah. And all of it, and then cut with video games and Iron Man and Marvel book comic superheroes, and all of them essentially turning the whole thing into a game. A sort of sadistic game.
And when you have Trump laughing about the sinking of ships rather than the capturing of ships, it's like a game. It's not serious. They are playing with nations in a really dismissive manner. I think is really horrible.
Yeah, please.
Thank you. Mr. President, you've said the war is, quote, very complete, but your defense secretary says this is just the beginning. So which is it, and how long should Americans be prepared
Well, I think
for
you could
this war
say
to
it
last
both.
for?
It's the beginning of building a new country.
It's a beginning and it's close to the end. Which is it? Well, it's both. Okay.
But they have no Navy, they have no Air Force, they have no anti-aircraft equipment. It's all been blown up. They have no radar. They have no telecommunications, and they have no leadership. It's all gone. So, you could look at that statement. We could call it a tremendous success right now as we leave here. I could call it, or we could go further, and we're going to go further. But
It's idea that he can say both things and then, fumble around to justify saying the opposite of what he's just said. And I find this interesting. So Nandita Bose here says, I was in the room for the presser, and one thing that always stands out about Trump is his ability to present two versions of the same event in a single breath. Vance was maybe less enthusiastic, but quite enthusiastic. So that's what Trump said. Maybe less enthusiastic, but quite enthusiastic about going to war. And the war is, quote, very complete and just the beginning. It just that double speak, double think. To know and not to know, to be conscious of complete truthfulness while telling carefully constructed lies, to hold simultaneously two opinions which cancelled out, knowing them to be contradictory and believing in both of them, to use logic against logic, to repudiate morality while laying claim to it, to believe that democracy was impossible and that the party was the guardian of democracy, to forget whatever it was necessary to forget, then to draw it back into memory again at the moment when it was needed, and then promptly to forget it again. And above all, to apply the same process to the process itself. That was the ultimate subtlety, consciously to induce unconsciousness, and then once again to become unconscious of the act of hypnosis you had just performed. Even to understand the word doublethink involved the use of doublethink. George Orwell, 1984. I just thought that was worth bringing in there. So you promised the Iranian people you would help them, as we talked about. Will I help them? I'd like to if they can behave, but they've been very menacing. So essentially, it's all the Iranian people's fault that the US is no longer going to be helping them. Now, Shashank Joshi from The Economist here, I don't know if he's quoting from the article. The Iran war has put Asia on the brink of an energy panic. He says, you wouldn't be able to write this as satire. A group of people come to office insisting that America's main foreign policy error of the last 30 years has been overcommitment to the Middle East, start an unnecessary war that consumes their interceptor and munition stockpiles, causes an energy crisis in Asia, and then forces them to move THAAD batteries from South Korea to the Gulf, all while changing their mind on a day-to-day basis whether they intend to arm a Kurdish invasion force. You can't make it up. That's what you just can't make it up. It's nuts. Absolutely nuts. Brian Kilmeade here on Fox News. If you want to diminish the Iranian threat, if you want to make sure this ends with complete Iran capitulation, show some guts and go through that strait.
If they could get the prices of oil up, that the president would have to draw from the conflict. So just careful, guys.
Right. And he said they should go to strategic oil reserve. That's what Joe Biden did to get prices down without a crisis. The administration announced $20 billion maritime reinsurance plan. So he's saying, hey, guys, even though we get the oil, the market's flush, this is fear, I'm still going to insure your ships. So go through the strait. And, you know, that's just part of it. If you want to diminish the Iranian threat, if you want to make sure that this ends up with complete Iran capitulation, sow some guts and go through that strait and do it.
So that is, I guess he's speaking on behalf of Trump there. He's kind of regurgitating Trump's position. But, you know, just have some guts and go through that strait. Okay, CNN reporting, Phillips O'Brien says, to which, well, there might be no clear goal to the US attack on Iran, but there is definitely one thing that is not a goal, and that is democracy for Iran. So it appears that Trump has told CNN, it appears that, you know, again, regime change, democracy, nation building, and trying to nurture democracy in Iran, that's not on the agenda at all anymore. Trump tells CNN he's not worried whether Iran becomes a democratic state. So all those people who were hopeful, those exiled Iranians or the people that have been protesting in Iran, hopeful that Donald Trump does have their back, he's now said he's not worried about whether Iran becomes a democratic state, because he's not worried about, like, that doesn't bother him. He only gets involved for economic reasons. He's incredibly transactional. Now I've talked about how that's generally, we're being very cynical about things. That's how our nations go about it, particularly powerful nations in imperial eras. That's what they do. They go around the world sticking their flag in, helping themselves to natural resources, and then use their armed forces to either extract or exploit those natural resources or protect the transport of those natural resources around the world. That's really the frame of mind that Donald Trump is in at the moment. But not everyone's happy about that, as you can imagine. In the Gulf states themselves, there is discontent. Breaking news, Saudi foreign minister said, for 36 years, we believe that American bases protected us. But in the first war, we learned that, in fact, we were protecting them. Wow. I had to do a correction, by the way. So yesterday, I mentioned that Baron Trump, and I did attach some skepticism on this. I said, you know, I'm not sure this is definitely true. Baron Trump had invested $50 million in oil before the war broke out. That's now been debunked. Loads of people reported that, but it's been debunked. There's no, well, at least there's no evidence that he has done that. So just, I do have to make that correction, and apologies for repeating that and not looking to it first. Now, Board of Peace, the Board of Peace. Indonesia is suspending its involvement with Trump's Board of Peace, according to the Indonesian Foreign Minister Sugiono, who said the decision to suspend participation was taken because of the latest military escalation in Iran. I wonder how many others will follow suit. I hope many, because you can't start up a Board of Peace and then bomb a country, go to war almost straight away afterwards. And getting the FIFA Peace Prize and then bombing one of the nations who is actually coming to the World Cup that you are hosting. Absolutely incredible. I mean, that's something that's never happened before. And we might ask, where have you been, JD? Where have you been the last, I don't know, 10 days? Well, it turns out he's been hoisted by his own petard.
We're reminding people that Donald Trump delivered peace and prosperity, and Kamala Harris has delivered war all over the world and unaffordable groceries and housing here at home. We're going to stop sending our young people to faraway lands. We are not the policemen of the world. One of the most important selling points for President Trump's agenda is when you project American strength and when you engage in smart diplomacy, you can keep the world from blowing up. If you're worried about the world spinning out of control, if you're worried about a military draft, if you're worried about, God forbid, a world war, the best way to prevent it is to vote for Donald Trump. Our interest, I think, very much is in not going to war with Iran, right? It would be a huge distraction of resources. It would be massively expensive to our country.
He has to be disappeared at the moment because any appearance for JD Vance, you just play that back to him. You'll read those words back to him, and he's not got a leg to stand on. So whether it's as a result of Donald Trump and his administration saying, JD Vance, you know, do one, or JD Vance saying, I can't stand for this because I actually campaigned on you not going to war literally with Iran. And since you've done that, I'm going to sit this one out. I don't know if it's him or the administration causing this to happen, but JD Vance has disappeared. Now, this is interesting. And I talked about this yesterday. I said that Marco Rubio has been in the ascendancy in Trump's eyes. Everything's been about little Marco Rubio as opposed to JD Vance. Now, Trump never really liked JD Vance. He only chose JD Vance because Peter Thiel and I think Donald Trump Jr. convinced Trump to take a punt on JD Vance as the VP, as the vice president. But he wasn't going to go with JD Vance. And he's never really liked him. Remember, JD Vance was seen as lacking charisma and was not doing very well on the campaign trail at all. It was all going really badly for JD Vance that time. Do you remember when he went into that donut shop? And it was so cringe. It was like, really bad. He was just bad at campaigning. So Trump never really liked him. And I think now he's wondering who's going to replace him. But Trump likes to play around with these ideas and people. He loves to be the kingmaker, or like, if you are going to succeed, you're succeeding because I chose you. And I think we were always going to see an element of a cat playing with a mouse, I think, with regard to who was going to run after Trump. At a recent Mar-a-Lago gathering, Trump informally asked about 25 Republican donors and allies whether they would prefer Marco Rubio or JD Vance as the GOP presidential candidate in 2028, according to NBC News. According to attendees, the room overwhelmingly responded in favor of Rubio. Now, I think that's going to be natural. Most Republicans, especially if you're old school Republican, you're going to prefer Rubio to JD Vance. JD Vance is seen as mentioned, lacking charisma, but also quite ideologically hardcore, which is why many people think if Trump was to go before the end of his term, it might actually be worse because you'd get JD Vance in instead, and he is the puppet to Peter Thiel's puppeteering. So that is, I think, a really interesting nugget there that he asked the audience, and he will use that. He will take that on board. He likes to back winners, right? That's why I think he was always backing Russia. I mean, for many reasons, he's been backing Russia, not least probably Compromat, but also because he just thinks Russia's too big to lose, and he doesn't like to back a losing horse. Well, he won't want to back a losing horse here. And if he thinks that people much prefer Marco Rubio, he will back Rubio, and that will be at the expense of JD Vance. Now we're going to actually
don't laugh when the two leaders are.
We're going to come to that actually next. I'm going to bring that in later. We're not going to go to the UK yet. So let's now, here it is. So Sheldon Whitehouse, and I heard someone else talk about him earlier. This is a 5-minute 10 of him, but we'll just get a little sense of it first, and you guys can go and search this out. But Sheldon Whitehouse gives a list here of top 10 list of Trump's favors for Putin. So let's read through them. So he did this in the Senate just recently. Sheldon Whitehouse is brilliant, by the way. So if you think the America First slogan applies to anyone other than Putin, this list is going to be massive reality check. White House lays out 10 distinct times recently where the Trump administration didn't just negotiate, they basically functioned as a Kremlin's high-end concierge service. From freezing weapons for Ukraine while they were literally under fire to rolling out the red carpet in Alaska for a dictator. The pattern is so consistent, it's borderline predictable. As White House points out, quoting the late John McCain, Russia is essentially a gas station run by gangsters. So why is the most powerful man in the world acting like he's the one working the night shift at the Russian pump? Here is Sheldon Whitehouse walking through Trump's pro-Kremlin moves. Quote, here's a sampling of what Trump has done for Russia just lately, and usually at the expense of American interests. There are many, but here's the top 10. 1. After Trump and Vice President Vance theatrically chastised the heroic Ukrainian President Zelensky in front of the cameras in the Oval Office last year, Trump paused our weapons shipments to Ukraine. 2. In July, during the worst Russian bombing campaign of the war until that point, Trump paused an already funded weapons shipment to Ukraine, including the Patriot interceptors that protect civilians from Putin's savage attacks. 3. That same month, Trump's Treasury Department stopped imposing new sanctions and closing sanctions loopholes, effectively allowing dummy corporations to send funds, chips, and military equipment to Russia. 4. Leaked phone calls show that White House envoy Steve Witkoff and Putin envoy Kirill Dmitriev have worked together closely behind the scenes on a peace deal favorable to Russia. 5. Last summer, Trump rolled out the presidential red carpet for the Russian dictator on American soil with a summit in Alaska that yielded, unsurprisingly, no gains towards ending the war in Ukraine. 6. Trump's vice president traveled to the Munich Security Conference last year to parrot Russia's anti-Western talking points, pushed by right-wing groups that Putin has long funded and used to create political strife in Europe. 7. Trump installed Russia apologist Tulsi Gabbard as his director of national intelligence, much to the glee of the Russian state media. They called her, didn't they, our girl. She was our girl. 8. Upon the confirmation of Trump's Attorney General Pam Bondi, the Department of Justice shuttered its anti-kleptocracy work that had successfully targeted Putin's Russian oligarchs. 9. Late last year, Trump unveiled a new so-called national security strategy that abandoned traditional alliances in Europe and favored the transactional foreign policy that the Kremlin praised as largely consistent with Moscow's vision and desires. And 10. The Trump administration has even paved the way for Russia's return to global sports competition, ending its isolation in those arenas in the wake of the hostile Ukraine invasion and state-backed systemic doping programs in Russia. That's the top 10, but the list goes on. If Trump were purposefully doing Russia's bidding, it's hard to see what he would be doing differently. The United States is the most powerful nation in the world. Russia is a weak, corrupt regime. My old friend, Senator John McCain, used to say that Russia is a gas station run by gangsters with an army. It doesn't make sense that the president of the United States, who insists on being dominant in essentially every relationship, is so submissive to one person. And that one person is Russia's dictator, Vladimir Putin. So what is it about Trump? What is it about Trump that brings this state of affairs about? I think that's really well set out by White House. And like I say to any, like I would say to any Trump supporter and Ukraine supporter, if we were to sit down in conversation, it would be, what is your evidence that Donald Trump is working on behalf of Ukraine? Because, and I would list more than 10, I'd list 20 reasons why Trump appears to favor Russia and say, you need to explain that. If you genuinely support Ukraine and Donald Trump, well, I don't know how you can. I think it's actually an incoherent, these two positions do not cohere. It's an incoherent position to take. And you need to explain each and every one of those in light of the idea that Trump is working on behalf of Ukraine. Of course he's not. We all know he's not. And I don't know how anyone can maintain that he is working for the benefit of Ukraine. What else do we have? Just another little nugget to throw in here. So big DOJ favor for Erdogan. So let's rewind a little bit. Remember back in, I don't know when it was it 2017, 18, 19, whenever it was, Erdogan, the strongman leader of Turkey, someone that Trump really likes. He likes these strongmen leaders. And I think there was also talk about wanting to do, was he wanting to build some Trump stuff in Turkey? Or anyway, they were getting all rather pally, Trump and Erdogan. And Erdogan, hates the Kurds. So the idea is that PKK and other Kurdish groups are seen as terrorists in Turkey. And so when you had the Syria civil war, where you had, what was it, the Assad regime against 7 different entities fighting Assad, but also oftentimes fighting each other. One of them was ISIS. And so the US was in this really interesting position where it's like, right, we need to support anyone that's fighting against Assad because Assad sucks, and the Russians are fighting on behalf of Assad or with Assad. So we are supporting the rebels against the Assad regime. But it turns out that ISIS were one of the rebels, and that's really weird and uncomfortable because we're also at war with ISIS. And so anyway, the Kurds were a very useful set of people, broadly kind of secular and willing to put their bodies on a line to fight against Assad. So the US were supporting the Kurds, were giving them weaponry, so on and so forth. And then Trump gets pressure from Erdogan, and because he likes Erdogan so much, he agreed, pulled out of supporting the Kurds and left the Kurds in Syria to their own devices. Then there's that big prison breakout where the Americans basically, I think, really screwed up there. And I've long said, like I keep saying, that the 2 worst moments for foreign policy for Trump in Trump 1.0 was 1, Helsinki press conference, 2, throwing the Kurds under the bus. I think it was horrific. It was morally egregious, morally and politically egregious what Trump did to the Kurds. So now you've got the Iranian Kurds supposedly being tooled up by the Americans, and you've got the Syrian Kurds warning the Iranian Kurds not to go into alignment with the Americans because you cannot trust them. This is what I was reporting yesterday. Anyway, the point of me telling you all that is the idea that Trump and Erdogan, Trump loves himself a strongman leader. So in Europe, it's Viktor Orban. On the edges of Europe, it's Erdogan. It used to be Jair Bolsonaro. It's Vladimir Putin. It's Xi Jinping. It's Kim Jong-un. These are the people he loves. Okay, then there's this. Big Department of Justice favor for Erdogan. Trump is killing a long-standing case against Turkey's Halkbank for laundering billions for Iran. So on the one hand, you're fighting against Iran here. And on the other hand, you are letting off the DOJ lets off a Turkish bank that has laundered billions for Iran because you put your loyalty to your strongmen mateys first, and you put your politics second. Let me get this straight, says Ruben Gallego, who's a Arizona senator, isn't he? Trump just took us to war with Iran. Meanwhile, his DOJ just moved to drop the criminal case against the Turkish state bank accused of laundering billions for Iran. If Iran is the enemy, why help the people who funded them? Oh, right, to help his dictator friend Erdogan avoid scandal. Donald Trump is a grifter. He's corrupt. He's a gangster. He's a bully. He's a wrong-un. He is essentially the enemy, I think, of the people of America. I honestly think Trump's agenda is actually set against the benefit of the American people. Donald Trump is the enemy of the American people. Right, we're going to move on to the UK now. Let's talk about this special relationship between the UK. And this is Michael Clark, who's a military analyst on Sky News. I really like Michael Clark. And I love this nuance where he says we don't have a special relationship. We haven't had one for 40 years. What we do have is a specialist relationship.
I wanted to ask you, Michael, about the special relationship, because often we reflect on how it can be at its best.
Don't laugh.
When the two leaders are particularly close, you know, Blair and Bush, Blair and Clinton, Reagan, Thatcher. Weirdly, when it gets tested to the downside, does it fall back on people in the military, people in the security services, such that there's a slight hope that even if the two people at the top really start to dislike each other, there's a flaw to how bad the relationship can get?
Yeah, there is. I mean, I think that the special relationship, as depicted in the British press, has been over for 40 odd years. I mean, just ages and ages
look at this.
Because
this is some brutal truth this morning.
I mean, everybody has a special relationship with the United States because it's the United States. You know, everyone's relationship with America is sensitive because it's America. But what we have is different. We have a specialist relationship with the US. I'd say we don't have a special relationship. We have a specialist relationship. So our intelligence works very closely with theirs, GCHQ at Cheltenham. They exchange material every day, literally every day, with the National Intelligence Agency in the United States. We parcel up the world as to which bits of the world to listen to, which bits of the world to shine the light on. I mean, GCHQ can shine a light on any part of the world it wants. It can't look at all of the world all the time, but if it chooses to look at a bit of the world, it can shine a light straight onto it and hear telephone conversations, anything you like. And we do that on projects and exchange it. So the intelligence relationship is very close, as it is between generally the CIA and MI6, MI5 and FBI. Good relationship, not at the top particularly at the moment, but working relationships. And then there's the nuclear relationship. I mean, you know, we get our nuclear, our weapons from the United States.
So on and so forth. And I like that distinction. It's not a special relationship, but it is a specialist relationship where our specialists work in a very integrated fashion with the Americans. Now, with regard to the British position,
war started on the Saturday.
Militarily, the British position on Iran, that's where we're going to go to now. And we'll start with just a view here from Sir Richard Knighton, the Chief of Defence Staff, speaking here to the BBC.
War started on the Saturday. We saw the responses over the weekend. We were well set with our posture that had been built up over several weeks. And then on Monday, Sunday and Monday, we looked at different options, and then proposals were made to me on Tuesday, and ministers signed them off that day. And that's what we've seen this week flowing into the region to increase the strength and presence and our ability to defend our allies and our partners and our interests in the region.
You talk of being well set, but you'll be aware that HMS Dragon, the warship that's going to be sent to the region, it's still in Portsmouth a week on.
Yeah, HMS Dragon was in maintenance until the start of this week. And I'm enormously proud of the work of the Royal Navy, who've been working night and day to get that ship ready, get the ammunition on.
So a lot of controversy in the UK press about this HMS Dragon. I mean, I think it's completely over-egged because I think the RAF should have their air defences on their base rather than relying on a ship to go all the way from Portsmouth. This idea that we don't have enough ships, and then you've got the Conservative Party going crazy and Reform going crazy. It's like the Conservative Party didn't build a single destroyer from 2010 to 2024. When they're 14 years of them in charge, and they defunded the Navy massively, like famously so. And so the idea that they're now criticising the present government, who have actually started shipbuilding in a major way, is just insane. But the problem is that we were given no forward notice of this war in Iran, and I mean, we were expected to go to support the Americans in this war without being given any plans, without being given any forethought, and so on and so forth. And you know, that's why it's scrabbling around trying to get HMS Dragon ready, because that's one that has these air defenses that will be more useful. But yeah, this is probably the most dangerous time in the last 30 years that I've been in uniform. I agree wholeheartedly with what the Prime Minister said. So I won't play you the rest of it, but basically you've got an agreement from the Chief of Staff that the Prime Minister's position on Iran is the correct one. Right, that's where we're going to go to next. And this is important, I think, certainly in British politics. I wonder, it's a bit different in the United States because the government in charge the party in charge are the ones that are actually going to war, and it's obvious that the Democrats are against that. Although there's an interesting dynamic going on in America at the moment, where they are trying to get this supplemental package through to give another X billion dollars to the DoD to be able to restock on all the weapons they've used. And the Democrats, on the one hand, I guess should be dead against that and like, no, we're not going to fund that. But on the other hand, you've got a number of Democrats who are actually going to say yes to funding it. And it's a bit of a difficult situation for the Democrats, because if you vote it down, then you're voting down your own armed services not getting the weaponry they need to replace the stuff that they've used against Iran. So you can take a principled position on Iran, say it was wrong to attack Iran, it was illegal and unconstitutional, but they've used up these weapons and we do need those weapons. And you get other Democrats saying, no, I'm going to vote against that supplemental package as a statement on Iran. And you can, it's just a difficult one because it then looks like you are voting for the United States Armed Forces to be weaker because they aren't getting the replacement. And that, but it also shows how much money this war is costing the Americans. I mean, very conservatively, $1 billion a day, but I think it's far more than that. So anyway, you've got an interesting dynamic with that particular piece of legislation in the United States. But in the UK, you've had, and I don't know if, yeah, he is still there. Mark from the Little Whiskey Shop is still in the live chat. So Mark's got a principled position as a conservative, small and big C conservative, you don't mind me saying, Mark. So, and we chat on the back channels, and he's like, right, as a conservative, I am dead against, and a veteran, I'm dead against the government going to war to support Trump's project here, okay? And Starmer needs to stand up to the US. And initially we did stand up to the US, but then Starmer, you could make an argument, and Mark does make the argument, and I think there's some merit in this, but I'll give you the other side of the coin as well. The argument is that then Starmer backed down under pressure to allow the United States to use the bases at Diego Garcia and RAF Fairford in the UK to launch defensive bombing attacks under a narrow constraint that you can only use them defensively, and it is only, you know, in the context of supporting British interests and say RAF Akrotiri in Cyprus and so on and so forth. That drone hit the base. We initially thought it was from Iran. Now we believe it was either from Lebanon or Iraq. But either way, we thought it was from Iran. So we're like, right, we are going to mobilize and protect. But it wasn't a full-throated support of the Americans. It was kind of a bit of a middle position to take. So Mark then says, you know, with some merit, that is weak, that he should have stood up to Trump and actually not allowed the Americans to use our base at all. Like you've seen with, say, Pedro Sanchez in Spain, the problem for, like, and I always can't come back to this, but the problem for the UK is that when Pedro Sanchez did that, Antonio Costa, Ursula von der Leyen, Emmanuel Macron, they all came to his aid because it's a European state, right? And when Trump said we're going to sanction Spain, it was quickly pointed out that he was unable to sanction Spain because Spain is not an individual country in terms of a customs union and all of the trade agreements with the United States. So if the United States was to sanction Spain, it would have to sanction or tariff the whole of the EU. So what that means is if Pedro Sanchez is going to stand up to the Americans, he's got European politicians coming to his support to say, we've got your back. And he's also got the safety net of the EU trade regulations. Whereas if Starmer stood up and continued to stand up to Trump, and it was getting really heated, like I agree that I would like Starmer to do that, right? So I agree with Mark, is that all things remain equal, that's what Starmer should have done. But all things aren't equal. Like, we're not the same as Spain, right? We do not have the protection of the EU. And so if the UK on its own says you can't use our air bases like Spain did, then the United States says, well, we are going to tariff you on your own, and we could do that because you're not part of the EU. And you can have other European leaders say, oh, we agree with you, but they can't really support you because you're on your own. You're no longer in the EU. So Starmer was in this really uncomfortable position whereby he had to somehow give Trump something. And apparently it is, like, according to the legal analyses, it is well within the legal scope. So what the UK is wanting to do is to remain under international law in what we do. And so I think Starmer took the principal position originally, and then he did back down a bit, but I completely understand why he did back down. And so he's given the United States just about enough. The US is still angry. It showed that Starmer has stood up. So now publicly, so what happened initially is that Starmer said no to Trump. And then you had the Conservative Party and the Reform Party in the UK absolutely excoriating Starmer and saying we should have gone in fully in support of the United States. And there was a full-throated support for the US attacks from people like Kemi Badenoch and Reform UK. And then over time, what's happened is you've seen the polls come out, and they're getting even worse, that support for the war in Iran has got less and less popular. And you're now seeing Reform start to do a bit of a U-turn. And you're getting some people, not necessarily in the Conservative Party, but adjacent to it, or former Conservatives, talk in support of Starmer's positions. People like Peter Haig, even Tim Stanley. So it's a really interesting time politically in the UK concerning what's going on. Right. I told you the other day that then Trump came out and slagged off Starmer and slagged off the UK, saying we were a once great ally. Essentially, we're not anymore. And I said to you, it was shortly after he had a lunch meeting with Nigel Farage, and therefore it was Nigel Farage that was feeding Trump some of these ideas, and then he gets on Truth Social and slags off Starmer. And that actually that Farage is being a traitor. It turns out that while that was the plan, right, apparently Trump never met with Farage, and he was kind of snubbed. There was a change of itinerary. This is Farage on a boat on the Thames speaking to Guido Fawkes. This is a conservative kind of media setup, talking about how he's going to go to Mar-a-Lago.
President Trump has almost understood the deal. Almost. But I will be dining at Mar-a-Lago tomorrow night. And will reinforce the message.
Oh, yeah. So he will reinforce the message. So what you've had is Priti Patel. Who else you've had? You've had Nigel Farage. You've had, I think, Liz Truss. You've had a load of Conservatives and Reform people go over to America to slag off the British government, to kind of, I think, treacherously undermine our government to Trump. And I do get Mark's point here. I think there is merit in this position. Trump holds grudges. I agree. Starmer has pissed him off. I agree. Trump will not forgive him. I agree. Worst of both worlds. I agree. Pissed off Trump and capitulation showing weakness. I think it's not quite the worst of both worlds, because I think Trump might well have actually done more to the UK. And I think it could have gone into the realm of stopping working so militarily close, or trade tariffs, the threat of tariffs, all sorts of things. So I don't think it's the worst of both worlds, and that's kind of the key to my point. I feel that he kind of had to do that to escape the worst of saying no to Trump. But I also understand your position completely. So anyway, Farage in the end didn't actually make it to meet Trump, and we'll talk about that in a second. Anyway, before we do so, it's worth understanding the political landscape in the UK with regard to Trump. Interesting YouGov findings here. There's a big divide between Reform voters and all other views, all other political party members or supporters' views on Trump. 13% of British people are pro-Trump, according to this survey. 46% of Reform voters are. So in other words, that 13% of pro-Trump people are almost certainly largely from the Reform camp. So 67% of Britons describe themselves as anti-Trump, though nearly half of Reform UK voters are pro-Trump. So very pro-Trump. You get 14% of Reform, 4% of Conservatives, and then somewhat 32% of Reform, giving a 47% total there. Almost 20% of Conservative voters are pro-Trump. And then it goes down to sort of 4% for the Greens, 3% for Labour by the looks of it, 2% for Lib Dem. Reform definitely do have a very, very pro-Trump position compared to the rest of the country. More evidence of the Conservative Party mispositioning itself, says Gavin Barwell. So this is with regard to supporting. So essentially what happened is Starmer had it right, particularly initially, and I think Mark would agree with that. Like initially, it was like he had the Pedro Sanchez position, and that aligns with the majority of the population. So then you've seen, I think, the Conservative Party and Reform UK look at the polls and start to change their position on Iran. So they are not sticking so much to their guns that we should be supporting the US no matter what. 70% of Britons see Reform UK as pro-Trump, while also tending to see the Tories as being in favour of the US president. Britons see Reform UK as pro-Trump while being more divided. So this is a slightly different one. This is what you see the parties as being. So Reform UK, 70% of people see them as pro-Trump. 35% of people see Conservatives as being pro-Trump. 21% of people see Labour as pro-Trump, which is kind of bizarre to me. I don't particularly see that. And then anti-Trump, Greens have seen the most anti-Trump, then Lib Dems. I'd actually say Ed Davey from the Lib Dems is one of the biggest critics of Donald Trump. But anyway, this is all very interesting to kind of understand what's going on. There's this disconnect between, or there was a disconnect between the parties and the people. So YouGov, another one here, opposition to the US military action against Iran has risen by 10 points among Britons over the last week. So 25% support it, which is down 3 from the 2nd of March, and oppose it 59% plus 10. So they've gone from don't know probably to oppose it. So it is not a popular thing, the war in Iran. And you're starting to see this in the Daily Telegraph. Andrew Fox writes, we must stand up to America and quickly. Britain should maintain its alliance with the US where it benefits us, but the era of sentimental reliance must end. Now, for that to come from the Daily Telegraph, I think that's worthy of note. So someone's saying, look, Starmer's on the right side here, which is the UK side. So actually, Starmer is largely aligned, or the government is largely aligned to the position of the British people. Senator Ted Cruz here, Priti Patel. See, this annoys me. The reality of having our politicians literally going to the foreign country to lobby against our government, I think is disgusting. Honestly, I think it is not cool. Thank you, Senator Ted Cruz, says Priti Patel, for speaking out against Starmer's appalling $35 billion Chega surrender in the Senate. I met with Ted in Washington last week, so she met with him, and I raised this critical issue with him, and now he's in the Senate campaigning against the UK. That's the kind of thing that I do not think is cool. Like, by all means, stand up in Parliament, let's debate this in Parliament, but going to the United States and lobbying really important politicians in the United States against our country, I think is unacceptable. You know, irrespective of what you think on this matter or any matter, I just think I think that is poor form. Yeah, I would argue that is somewhat treacherous, you know. But there you go. And remember, the Chagos deal is an attempt for the UK to adhere to international law or international legal guidance. Now, when I was saying, you know, based on Stephen, Jared and Pete and others were telling me Marco is so involved, I thought they were going to attack us. So remember, we were talking earlier about how Donald Trump was aligning himself with the people around him, Steve and Jared. They aren't even in the government. Now, Lewis Goodall here says, with every passing day, the decision of Starmer and his cabinet, A, not to join the Iranian war, B, to delay access to bases, looks wiser and wiser. Trump's press conference last night shows he has no real idea what the objectives are, and its duration is arbitrary. And if it does endure, the economic consequences may prove ruinous, something he would have had to own if he had backed the effort. Absolutely. Now, as to go back to Nigel Farage, I'm really interested in this U-turn in reform, particularly. Nigel Farage heads to the US to meet President Trump. Richard Tice has landed, so Richard Tice is the 2IC, the second in charge of Reform UK. He's married to Isabel Oakeshott, or is his partner. She is was it Daily Telegraph? No, I think she has written for the Telegraph. Daily Mail, slags off the UK all the time, but lives in Dubai, right? Landed in the Gulf for meetings with UAE ministers. So again, Nigel Farage going to lobby abroad. Richard Tice going to lobby in the Middle East abroad against our government. I really, really have a problem with this. But it turns out that rather than receiving a formal invite to meet Trump, Farage was in fact invited to Mar-a-Lago by a member of the club, according to multiple people briefed on the matter. They said Farage had hoped he would be able to catch Trump for a conversation as the US president was scheduled to travel to Mar-a-Lago that evening. However, Trump had a change in the itinerary and decided to stay instead at Doral, about an hour's drive away. The reform leader's failure to secure an audience with the US president underscores a weakening of ties between the two populist leaders who famously formed a close relationship in the years before and after the 2016 Brexit referendum. So Farage misses out on Trump meeting as their relationship cools. That's one way of it. I don't know if their relationship is cooling, but that's how some are seeing it. Others saying, Trump snubbed him again. So it's not for the first time. A couple of days ago, the Reform were bigging up Farage, telling us he was going to meet Trump, and then it kind of fell through. He made a huge thing about going to the US, about his relationship with Trump, about Chagos, but he didn't meet Trump. He was shut out. Meanwhile, he's furiously backpedaling on his Iran position because of the polls. And here's where we're kind of going with this. It's the change of position. So if you can indulge me a few more minutes on this, I do want to go to it used to be called The Right Stuff. It's now Jeremy Vine here. I don't know who this young chap is, but next to Anne Widdecombe, who is someone I really do not like.
That Farage will still take us in the wrong direction with America.
Farage has a habit of imploding right before the finish line. I think he's a loser by definition of election. 7 out of 8 of his elections in the UK, he has lost. This is a guy who prioritizes, as Denise said, prioritizes himself. 140 working days he has claimed since the Clacton election. This is the geezer, that shot we saw there, him in Mar-a-Lago. Why is he there? To see Trump. Who did he not see? Trump, because Trump mugged him off.
Trump mugged him off. But the point is that he's not done a single surgery. So surgeries are what we call when an MP in their constituency sits down with their constituents and they have like a surgery where people can come in and complain about potholes on the road or whatever. His job, his primary job, Nigel Farage, should be, since he's been voted in, should be to be representing his constituents in Parliament. He doesn't turn up that much to Parliament, and he says, why should I? Everyone always slags me off. Well, because you're elected to do so. And he hasn't had a single surgery, as far as I'm aware. He's not turned up to a single surgery. He's taking all this money. He's earning more money than any other MP by having like 15 jobs or whatever it is. Getting money from gold bullion, all this stuff. Unbelievable. Anyway, Starmer distancing the UK from US-Iranian offensive increasingly is vindicated. Kemi Badenoch, leader of the Conservatives, will rue her terrible misreading of geopolitical realities. Farage trots along, however, while the stakes, even though Trump can't be bothered even to spend the time of day with him anymore. Ouch. But what you're starting to see, this is Robert Jenrick. So just to let you know, Robert Jenrick is one of the many former Conservative MPs who has defected to Reform. But I think he probably is a little bit more switched on than some of the Nigel Farage, right? And he is reading the room better because you see a change of stance from Reform on Iran here.
The United States asked Britain to join in those strikes in an offensive way. Would Reform's answer be yes? Because your colleague Richard Tice said we would help the Americans in any way they saw appropriate.
well, we will put the interest of the British public first. And as a rule of thumb, Laura, we will be very cautious before deploying British troops.
So he's like playing it back. We'll be cautious. When the quote there was from a reform was from Richard Tice, we would help them in any way. What was it? We'd help them in any way they saw appropriate, you know, whereas he's like, oh, we'd be cautious about deploying
British troops overseas into offensive action.
Well, that's not what your colleague Richard Tice said. He said if requests were made, we'd have said, yes, we're pleased to help.
That's for using our bases, joint bases, for example, like Diego Garcia. And frankly, it's ridiculous that we haven't enabled the US or didn't initially to use that base, which has been a cornerstone of our defense since the 1970s. But we haven't been asked. Our allies are proceeding with this action without us. And I think it's perfectly sensible for us to protect the security of our own troops first.
So that is a bit of a U-turn there, I would argue. Reform has seen the oil figures and read the polls, and I find its shameless vote chasing most encouraging. So this is Tim Stanley, who is a really conservative, I would argue, a really conservative guy, writes for the Telegraph routinely. But he's been one that's actually been weirdly supportive of, well, not weirdly, I think it's actually justifiably supportive of Starmer's position, which is, have you not learnt from 2003 in the Iraq War? If you were arguing that was illegal then this is even more illegal, right? And how come you were hauling Blair over the hot coals over Iraq, but now you're hauling Starmer over the hot coals for not going to war in Iran? Absolutely ridiculous. So then Robert Jenrick here lays it out. The Iranian regime is wicked, but this war needs to come to an end as soon as possible because it is making Britain poorer. Reform are a party for working people, not drawn out wars in faraway places. Wow. So what you are getting now is a massive backtracking from, this is a U-turn from Reform. But I don't know that it's from all of Reform. This is Robert Jenrick, who's, as mentioned, a former, I think, cabinet member for the Conservative Party. The liberal interventionists of the early 21st century failed our own people, leaving them poorer and more exposed to mass migration, not to mention the brave British men whose lives were lost. The British people have had enough of them. It's time to be realists and put Britain first. That's why Nigel Farage immediately ruled out suggestions that the UK might deploy boots on the ground. Well, actually, I'm not sure that was ruled out, and we'll come back to this. So this, and I'm not going to read it all, but essentially it's a massive U-turn. Robert Jenrick has done a massive Reform U-turn, which is, you know, welcome to see. But here is, actually, I'm not going to do this in this is 3 minutes long. But here, Beth Rigby speaks to Nigel Farage, and Beth Rigby says, there have been various positions from Reform, their front bench of the Reform, as in the main politicians in Reform. Farage said the UK should do all we can to support US military action, which would imply boots on the ground, by the way. Tice said Reform would use RAF to bomb Iran. Jenrick said he didn't think it necessary for UK to join the bombing. Quote, today Farage tells me we cannot get involved directly in another foreign war. So now Farage appears to have done a U-turn because he's read the tea leaves. He knows the polling is not good. So there's no ideology here. It's like, oh no, oh, that's unpopular. Oh, we change our mind on that. Labour source says that Nigel Farage and Reform spent the past week saying that they would bomb Iran, and now they're backtracking as petrol prices rise, leaving their foreign policy in chaos. That's not serious leadership. That's panic. Quite the U-turn from Farage on the Iran war. On March 2nd, he is much more gung-ho. We should do all we can to support the operation. I make that perfectly clear. And now he's like, let's not get involved in another foreign war. But I think this is an interesting piece by Hugo Guy, saying ex-Tories are at odds with Farage's stance on the UK role, although Farage today has finally actually aligned himself with Robert Jenrick. But that message didn't get through here to Andrea Jenkins, who is a Reform mayor, former Conservative politician. I do not like her at all, one iota. But here's Andrea Jenkins talking about, well, being asked about boots on the ground, and she's like, yeah, no, I'm not ruling it out.
Do I want to see British troops on the ground? Ideally not.
at this stage, but I do think we should be.
But not never.
Not. You can't rule anything out. Though it's too hostile. We don't know the direction it's going to go in.
So that kind of fumbling around, but basically not ruling out boots on the ground. So the reform are all over the shop, to be perfectly honest. Now, talking about this special relationship that people like reform politicians and a lot of conservative politicians are saying that we've ruined, that Starmer's ruined the special relationship. As Michael Clark pointed out, we don't have a special relationship. We've got a specialist relationship. This is again on the Jeremy Vine show.
Can we stop with the special relationship? And also Starmer, not his number one fan here, but he's on the right side of public opinion. All these right-wing newspapers are trying to lead us to believe that actually the country wants this war. We don't. Even conservative voters overwhelmingly
But we don't want to fall out with Trump. We don't want to fall out with Trump.
What are we saying here? We can all, I think, a lot of us who are paying attention can see that this man is a 34 convicted felon, all the stuff behind him, the Epstein files, the stuff that's coming out gets darker and darker and dodgier all the time. He's obviously got signs of cognitive decline. Are we saying he can launch any illegal war he likes, kill as many little school kids as he likes, right? And we, because of this special relationship, where they just abuse us, by the way, they just tariff us whenever they want, threaten us whenever they want, insult our troops. He insulted our troops. He said they hung back British troops during Afghanistan. And all these papers and all these right-wing commentators back this man.
I love that. It honestly gives shivers down my spine. I honestly totally with that. Really well put, and I could feel her anger, her righteous indignation here. I'm just going to show you this. This is not really to do with anything to do with the Iran war, but this is it Kevin Maguire, who's a left-wing journalist, next to Kwasi Kwarteng, who's a former Conservative Party chancellor, the one that came up with the disastrous Liz Truss economic project that led to her demise. But anyway, this is a really salient point.
This is
such an important point. I've made this point many times before. When we talk about immigrants coming to our country, taking our jobs, using our services, those immigrants coming to our country, economic migrants. When we talk about British people going abroad, they're no longer migrants. They're now expats. Oh, they're expats that go into Dubai. No, they're not. They're economic migrants. Those are bloody immigrants. They're British immigrants. Call it what it is. So really interesting. Watch out. Anytime you hear talk about expats, oh, those are British people that have the right to go and live in other places. They have a right to go and use the welfare state and the healthcare system in these other places and have jobs there and yeah, pay tax. But if people come and do that here, they're not expats. No, they're bloody immigrant. Bloody Kwasi Kwarteng. I would have gone nuts at Kwasi Kwarteng next to Kevin Maguire here. That's because they go there to work. Oh, right. So all immigrants come. So I'm fairly sure you say immigrants nick our jobs, right? On the one hand, you say they're coming here to nick our jobs, and on the other hand, you're saying that they're sponging off welfare. Well, which one is it? Are they nicking our jobs? In which case, they're paying tax. They're working. They're paying tax, or they're not working and they're sponging off welfare. But if you're saying that our guys go and that you can't call them immigrants, you have to call them expats because they're working. Okay, so literally no immigrants that come here work then. Okay, that's bullshit. You are talking bollocks. I'm sorry, Kwasi Kwarteng, but you're wrong. Don't look after their pets. Anyway, so as we kind of draw into a close here, the larger problem, and this is right, let's broaden it out a little bit to all of Europe, or in fact all of the world, the Gulf states particularly, right, is that, like, here's an example, but this isn't me trying to be pro-Labour or anything. I want to talk about a larger point here, is that, so for example, UK jobs market shows the strongest signs of improvement in 3 years. As the Labour government, you'd be like, right, we're working really hard. We're improving this in education. We're doing this here. We're doing that there. We're building more ships over here. We're doing this, or whatever it is, right? It's like, yeah, it's really difficult economic climate at the moment with the US starting trade wars with everyone. And we're getting over these things. We're getting over that. And we've got this obstacle. And yes, jobs are looking good. We're getting AI investment into the UK. There's loads of tech investment. We've got a bunch of unicorns starting. Interestingly, the first defense unicorn has started with. Unicorn is a startup that's worth $1 billion. Is it? That's right? Is a Ukrainian British like it's seen as British, but like it's like 9 Ukrainians in Britain that started this thing up. Is now the first like defense unicorn in the UK. But anyway, like there are all these like bright areas of brightness in terms of things to do with the government, and this will be the same in every country around the world. And then Trump's gone to war with Iran, and you're like, if I was in the government now, I'd just be like, oh Jesus Christ, mate, honestly, really, like, give us a break, man. You shut down the Straits of Hormuz by what you've done there. Now we're having to lift sanctions on Russia. Now energy. We just worked really hard to get bloody energy prices down. Do you know how hard we worked to get energy prices down? And now you've done this. Like, honestly, Trump has a lot to answer for here, politically, as well as kind of like the moral, legal side of things. It's just the cost to every country at the moment. You're going to have governments like that must, behind the scenes, they must be bloody furious with Trump. They really must be. Okay. Just the last thing I'll say is like spreading out a little bit to talk about Germany. So Spain's Deputy Prime Minister Yolanda Diaz has accused German Chancellor Friedrich Merz of behaving like a vassal to Trump, slamming his silence as Trump attacked Spain at the White House. Now, he did come out a little bit afterwards and say some stuff in support of Spain and the UK. Quote, what Europe needs today is leadership, not vassals who pay homage to Trump. So there is a bit of friction going on in Europe. And Merz he came out of all the European leaders most on the American side. And I don't know about if I've got any German viewers here. I'd like to know what you can tell me about this. I wonder whether Germany's always had a relationship with Israel that is very nuanced, given the history of Germany in the Second World War, the Nazis and concentration camps, etc., and the Holocaust, right? So Germany, I think, has maybe overcompensated in the last sort of 20 years or whatever in terms of supporting Israel at times when other countries have been less desiring to support Israel. For example, with the bombing of Gaza, Germany was a bit more supportive than other European nations. Does that underwrite why Friedrich Merz has been more supportive of the US and Israel's attack on Iran? I don't know. Is he just being, as some say here, is he just being diplomatic? Right, Merz said he would discuss it in private, not a TV spectacle. Interesting. So the German Chancellor on Iran has then said, we are concerned that there is apparently no common plan for how this war can be brought to a convincing end quickly. So now I don't know whether this is an accurate set of quotes here from Max 25, but if it is, then that's Merz actually walking back a little bit, like we've seen with maybe Reform and the Tories in the UK. So we have no interest in the dissolution of Iran's territorial integrity, its statehood, or its economic viability. They are closely connected with Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, and that is precisely why we must not let up now in our support for Kyiv. Good to hear that. While other partners are withdrawing capabilities from NATO's eastern and northern flank, we remain engaged there. I share the hope of Trump that this war will end quickly. Therefore, from our perspective, there is no reason to consider easing sanctions against Russia. And if faced with a choice between sanctions or solidarity, our position is clear. We stand on the side of Ukraine. Now, that is really good. I like to hear that. Interesting difference between, I think, Spain on the one hand, France more so on Spain's side, and then Germany on the other hand. Right, that is enough from me with regard to today's update. Let's look at what some of you have said. We have Rob Cook. Thanks, Rob, for gifting 5 ATP Geopolitics memberships. Rob's one of the members of the Back Channel team where we often talk. It's great to have him on board there. So thank you, Rob. I appreciate your support, my friend. And the Pentagon, Rob as well, and I feel really bad about this, but Rob sorted out an ice rink. Part of what he does is in the wintertime sorts out like these ice rinks that pop up, and he's got this ice rink, and he had, my son used to ice skate. He was British. Oscar was a British national champion at the age of something. I mean, he's quite lucky. There were very few boys doing it, so you know that helped. But I'm not denigrating his achievement. It's actually brilliant. And so I'd love, but he's given up, and he's not been on the ice rink since he's given up, actually. But Rob's like, we are raising money for Ukraine, and we've got this pop-up ice rink in Milton Keynes, I think it was, or somewhere, and it's like, it was just a bit too far for me to drive for the evening. But he was raising money for Ukraine, so that's really, really cool. Switchdog here says the Pentagon got $1 trillion budget. If they need more money, then we as Americans have failed big time. Pentagon wasted money. Well, the problem for the Pentagon is that they have failed every single budget that has ever, every single audit, sorry, that it's ever had. And so I don't think the Pentagon, and you'd pretty much expect this given the size and the expenditure, almost $1 trillion of budget that they have, it's unsurprising they're going to fail financial budgets. But certainly, you know, if any department needs a bit of a reform in the way it procures, it's going to be the Pentagon. Same can be said about the UK MOD and our procurements, which have got pretty bad rep over time. But thank you, Switchdog, for your super chat there. And thank you, Kevin Force, for supporting the channel, as you always do. You are an absolute legend. Thanks to all of you super chatters there. I didn't see if there were any other comments on the live chat that were worthy of discussion, but thank you for having, or as you always do, really lively chats in the live. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share. It makes a heck of a difference. And I will return to you later. I do have another video that I'm going to record that's going to be a quick one, looking at Ukrainian drone dominance, FPV drone dominance. There's some data coming out from Russians to suggest that Ukraine really is sort of pushing a bit of an advantage at the moment with regard to drone dominance. So good stuff. Anyway, thanks all. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon. Toodle pips.